I am here today to talk about Bevacizumab. You may know it better by its original brand name of Avastin, but now it's off patent, so they're biosimilar. So we're going to use the word Bevacizumab. Before I begin, how many in the audience know about HPV? That's great. How many in the audience have ever heard of recurrent respiratory papillomatosis? We're going to start there. When we talk about why it matters to have speakers at events such as this, I am why drug repurposing matters, especially in the rare disease space. We're going to talk about that a lot more. First, we're going to do a little lesson. This picture is recurrent respiratory papilloma on the vocal cords of a patient. It is caused by HPV-6 and HPV-11. Hopefully, everyone represented today is vaccinating against HPV-6 and HPV-11. If you're not, take this talk home. Those are the growths. Juvenile onset, which is what I have, is passed in utero from a mother to a child. That mother may never have known she was infected with genital HPV. So she'd have no way of knowing that she was passing this virus to her child. When it becomes active, it grows in the airway, usually on the vocal cords, but it can have distal spread, which is what I've experienced. And it spreads down the trachea, the corona, the bronchus, and into the lungs. When it's in the lungs, which happens in about 8% of us, it has a 32-fold increase in malignancy compared to the same disease on the larynx. So when you're HPV-6 and 11 and HPV-11 are no big deal, I'm here to tell you they're a very big deal. I am not going to go on the science here. You can look it up because I do not even want to pretend like I understand the science of this. But Bevacizumab is basically a VEGF inhibitor, which I think we all know what that is. And how this became of interest in the RRP community, Dr. Moore out of Germany published a report, I believe it's probably 5 patients at the time, showing when he administered this drug to these patients, they no longer needed surgery. Why does that matter? Because we all have surgery. Not a big deal. When you had over 250, 300, 400, 500 surgeries, that's when those surgery becomes a very big deal. So being the determined person that I am, I found this paper and I began taking this paper to anyone who would listen, trying to get this drug for myself. Of course, you go to an oncologist with the drug for what is then a benign disease. They're going to look at you like you've lost your mind. Why would you want to do that? So then came the part of the advocacy organization, educating the community what surgery really meant to us. Because as a clinician, you do the surgery, you discharge, that's your last interaction with the patient. You don't really know the recovery process or the mental process of surgery, especially when it's into the hundreds. So off we go. So imagine going into an otolaryngologist's office with these papers and saying, hey, I want to start this drug, Bevacizumab, because Dr. Moore in Germany did this, and look, they're not having surgery anymore. What is an otolaryngologist trained to do? Do surgery. So that was our first obstacle. Issue 2 was, once we got the otolaryngologist on board, getting an oncologist that would work with that doctor to approve giving this treatment to the patient. Well, Bevacizumab isn't indicated for RRP anywhere in the world. So now the obstacle was a patient might can access it. We have the clinicians agreeing to do it. Their insurance won't cover it. So it comes to the case of availability does not always equal access. So that became another point of the mission of the foundation. But our biggest obstacle has always been that Avastin is off patent. And to get a new indication on a generic, which are biosimilars because this is an oncology drug, is just frankly not going to happen in the US. At least we haven't found that pathway yet. The NIH is finishing up a phase 1 on safety and efficacy. We're hoping that having that phase 1 done brings some interest to creating funding sources for a phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial. So what is it like to live with this disease? I was diagnosed at the age of 5. Like I said, I've had 250 surgeries, constant breathing issues, constant voice issues, and I'll get more into voice in just a moment. Had an emergency tracheotomy at the age of 30 because of the stenosis of having so many surgeries. Surgery is not something we're wired to have dozens and hundreds of times. So I was diagnosed with PTSD at the age of 50, learning a lot of the things I do that I thought everyone else did was simply not the case. Even at the age of 50, I was having surgery every 2 months. So now when I go back to the voice, prior to starting Bevacizumab, because of all the surgeries and the surgical damage, because all it takes is one surgery on your larynx to cause permanent damage, my voice was nothing more than a barely audible whisper. After starting Bevacizumab, about a year later, this voice came back. To give you an example of this, hopefully I can get it to work.
Jasper Rabbit has a passion for carrots. The ones that grew on Cracker Field were the best. Crisp, fat, and free for the taking.
Jasper Rabbit had a passion for carrots. And the
That is before and after on Bevacizumab. As you can tell, it is a miraculous change. And I don't use the word miraculous lightly. How has this treatment changed my life? My last surgery was September of 2018. Remember, I was having them every 2 months at the age of 50. First infusion was 2017 at Emory in Atlanta. Current infusion counts, I've been on this treatment 7 years. Adverse events, new high blood pressure that I did not have prior to starting the drug, that is managed with medication, and some post-infusion fatigue for about the first 24 to 48 hours, which sounds awful, but when you took a week to recover from surgery, I'll take that 24 hours. The approval journey from my first taking it to Mayo to my first infusion at Emory was arduous, knowing that everything was stacked against me. Since that time, our organization has been able to reach hundreds of patients and help them get this therapy for themselves. Insurance is still kind of a roll of the dice, but we're learning how to appeal those no's with documentation, appeal those no's with the economic advantage to the payer over this drug compared to surgery every 2 months. It's a significant financial savings, not just to the patient and the payer, but also to the government healthcare system. In the US, if you're on state healthcare or on Medicare, which is our senior citizens primarily, you can't access this drug. They will not pay for it. So then they have to go to the manufacturer and try to get compassionate use. That's starting to be difficult. Everyone is tightening their belts. Genentech, Roche, the original manufacturer, has dissolved the infrastructure for the drug because they no longer own the patent. So we talk about surgery a lot. I want to kind of dive into that a little bit so you can really understand what no more surgery has really meant. I don't have a recovery period anymore. I don't have a week where I'm laying around the house wondering, when am I going to feel better? When is my quality of life going to return? Patient not having to miss school or work for surgery. Because surgery's one day, then the recovery can be a week, unless you're a child and you're eating a hamburger the same day. I'm not a child. Every surgery meant more damage to my vocal cords and my airway. Each surgery contributed another incident to medical trauma. But most of all, each surgery now, I know brought medical trauma to my children. Case in point, there was a surgery when I was being dilated and removal of papilloma, and I had an undiagnosed pharyngeal tear. Sent home a week later, I'm in the ER, still complaining about pain. I did not know at the time how serious it was, but I had a mediastinal mass from the infection. My son was 5, my daughter was 12. And to this day, they still talk about how worried and scared they were. They shouldn't even have to have that conversation. But for so long, my disease only had a surgical treatment. And surgery was all we knew. Surgery was all the doctors would do. But I know that we have hope. And repurposing of Bevacizumab has brought us a lot of hope. So I no longer have to fear about going under anesthesia. How many of you have gone under anesthesia a couple times, or family member, and you had that fear, I'm not going to wake up, or I'm going to get sick afterwards. I'm going to say crazy things to my spouse, all those things. The fear of not waking up is very real for me. No more fear of a surgical mistake because of what had happened before. No more scheduling my life around surgery and recovery. And like I said, now I've got this sound. And even if you're not a person of faith, I hope you'll appreciate this. When the sound came out, I said, God, for as long as I have this voice, use it. 3 months later, I was asked to take over the Recurrent Respiratory Papillomatosis Foundation. I have traveled the globe speaking about RRP. I've been part of 4 publications, including our most recent consensus statement on the use of Bevacizumab. And I was asked to speak at the White House, specifically the Biden White House. You got it. Good for y'all. I'm on the treatment every 6 to 7 weeks. I go in, the drug is ordered. Once the drug begins, 35 minutes and I'm going home. So as you can tell, it has really changed my life from surgery. So this is some of the work that I've done. I take no credit for this. It's all the community. And on 6/11, we're holding our 2nd annual International RRP Awareness Day in Washington, D.C. Doing all we can to bring awareness to a disease, an HPV-specific disease that no one knows and no one talks about. Most of all, RRP is not going to take away my joy. And as I said, Bevacizumab has given me back my quality of life. And so I've been a little busy these past few years. And I'm really not a very serious person, so I hope that comes through. I'm a Mimi. I have to throw that out there. But that's my life, and it's a sweet life. I want to talk about a little bit about the consensus statement that we did. And we did this with several doctors in the US, and this followed up to the first one that was done, I believe, 4 years prior. Because what we've noticed is because there's not an indication, it really was the wild, wild west out there on the dosage and use of Bevacizumab in our patient population. And we wanted to give clinicians and patients some sort of consensus on best practices. We don't dare say guidelines because of the red tape involved. So that is why we did a consensus statement. After following the process of the consensus, which was Delphi method, we came up with what we thought was a pretty decent dosing rubric for clinicians. Start out your patient every 3 weeks, do 3 doses. In-office evaluation of the larynx, see if there's still any growth. If the growth is gone, you begin spacing out the dosing. Usually by 1 week, 3 more treatments, another week, 3 more treatments, until you find the happy spot for that patient. And it's going to vary from patient to patient because every patient has their own disease journey and their own severity of disease. Current obstacles are overcome, and I know those of you in this room will be very well aware of this. The original molecule is no longer under patent. That original manufacturer has dissolved the infrastructure. They have no desire to restart that for a rare disease. In the US, and I've learned it's similar in Europe, there's no incentive for a biosimilar to conduct a stage 1 all the way to marketing trial. There's nothing for them from the government financially to make it where they say, hey, let's invest in this, which is why we were so thankful for the NIH. We were able to find a funder to give the funding to buy the drug. And then the NIH did the phase 1, which they're in their observation portion right now. In the US, we wonder, can we get this treatment indicated on the CMS continuum? CMS, Center for Medicare Sciences. And in the US, basically, if a drug's on that, your payer has to pay it because that's Medicare and that's kind of the landscape that kind of rules us. It's been done with another rare disease, but in the current landscape, we just don't know if there's a way forward right now. So we're trying to figure out what do we do, what's next? Because yes, more and more patients are being able to access this drug. But if even one patient can't access the drug, I have failed as a patient leader because we are the patient's knight on shining horse. And I don't take that lightly. So they are looking for us to do something so that they too can access the drug. And as I've already said, treatment with this, especially the biosimilar, is far less costly than surgical interventions. What's my message to those of you in here today that have patients or are wondering if the clinical trial is worth the possible risk? Let the patient decide what risk is acceptable to them, especially with rare diseases, because quite often to us, the rare disease and the current way it's managed is far riskier than some side effects from a drug. So let your patient be a major part of that decision. Because we also know the day-to-day life of a patient is not recorded in an EHR. So clinicians, we love you, but ask your patients how they're doing. What is their life like once they go home? I think we can all agree that surgery into the hundreds is not a treatment. It was a Band-Aid at best, and it was allowed to be called a treatment for far too long. We're basically still treating the disease the same way we did when I was diagnosed in 71, except now there's some cool lasers, and we do have some off-label. And I think we're all here for the same reason, because we know we can bring therapies to patients if we join together to work against the regulatory red tape. One company in red tape is difficult, but if you take all the voices in here, the red tape doesn't stand a chance. So thank you again. I hope that my voice has given you a renewed sense of passion on what you're working for. This drug has changed my life. I'd also like to add, because they are a funder, we are a CZI Rare as One organization. I'm sitting here looking at a fellow rare as one right now. So, thank you, CZI, and for all the funders in the room. I did not mention changing lives, and we are grateful. Thank you.